Hello, my name is Heather Fleming, and I'm the Executive Director of Change Labs. Yat she Heather Fleming inishe, betani nishle, bilagana bashishchin, chodachini dashache do bilagana dashanella. And I'm here today with my co-founder, Jessica Stago.
Yat she Jessica Stago shia, betani nishle, do zilgan bashishchin, ki ani dashache do zilgan dashanella.
Change Labs is a Native-led and Native-controlled nonprofit located in Tuba City, Arizona. We support Native American entrepreneurs, vendors, small businesses. We call them change makers. And there's a whole set of rules to operating a business on tribal lands, and we help them navigate those processes.
We are really excited to be opening up our co-working space in Tonanezdiza, or Tuba City. It's in northern Arizona, and where we'll be offering entrepreneurs resources, access to other entrepreneurs and like-minded change makers, as well as technical assistance and programming, all to support the startup businesses and to support the growth of existing businesses.
For every dollar earned on the reservation, 65 cents of it is being spent off reservation. And to me, that makes a lot of sense because we don't have a lot of businesses other than fast food, dollar stores, and gas stations. So it makes sense that people go off the reservation when they need school supplies, when they need clothes, when they want to go see a movie, or even just get coffee or boba tea. None of those things exist in our communities, so people have to leave. And unfortunately, that means that we don't retain wealth in our communities. Every time resources come in, we just let it go back out with spending our dollars off the reservation.
Yeah, so what it means for the community is that people don't have jobs because those jobs are off the reservation. And also, people are paying more essentially for essential items. So they have to, they have to pay for gas. They take time out of their day to drive off the reservation to access goods and services. So it's all of that causes that financial leakage.
It's interesting. There's resources like this in urban areas, but when Jessica and I started collaborating in 2013, 2014 timeframe, we were collecting data from all of these entrepreneurs that we were working with, and it was just shocking how many of them told us, I don't have a desk in my home, or I can't print a document, or I don't have internet, or my internet is unreliable. So while, a co-working space may not sound very novel, it's not really something that we have anything of in our communities. I think we're one of the only co-working spaces in tribal America, right?
I think so. Definitely one of the only centers focused directly on entrepreneurship and supporting people with ideas.
Yeah.
Without any expectation of, returns or the financial impacts of that. We are really just supporting people who have ideas and dreams about the community.
Yeah, and doing it in a culturally relevant way, and talking about success in a different way, or redefining what it is to be a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, we did a lot of narrative building in the beginning. I remember when we first started, one of our initial programs was the incubator, and a lot of people, response to us when we said we were running an incubator was, you mean an incubator like with chickens? And so we had to do a lot of building that narrative and building the language around entrepreneurship. I think you even at one point did a
workshop in Gallup in 2018
to define entrepreneurship in native languages, which a lot of people still talk about today. That was really cool. The way we first got started, we did the narrative building mostly through Change Labs, the event, by hosting an event around supporting entrepreneurship. But then we realized that we needed a space where entrepreneurship can live, where native entrepreneurship can flourish. And that's when we said we really need to open up a physical co-working space. And also our members were telling us that the most valuable thing that we provided was access to other entrepreneurs and that camaraderie among other people who were doing the same things they were, or who had experience in a space where there's just not a lot of resources for them.
I've been reflecting on this quite a bit myself, and I was thinking that, me, you, and Natasha were technically the 3 co-founders of Change Labs. We were all doing our independent work for entrepreneurs before Al Henderson brought us together. But it wasn't until that he did bring us together and we became like a community. That's, I think, when all of our work really started taking off. And I think that's the kind of experience that we want to bring to the entrepreneurs we serve is here's a place where you can find your community, where you can get work done and where you can make change. But why did we choose Tuba City? There was a lot of reasons for that. Well, I remember one was the proximity to the Flagstaff airport, because we were like, we need a place where we can bring in people to visit and whatnot. But there's also lots of things going on in Tuba.
Yeah, we recognized that Tuba was there's a lot of economic potential there. It's in the center of the Grand Circle of the Grand Canyon and Glen Canyon Dam, and also Monument Valley. So, tourists travel through there. Anywhere from 3 to 6 million people travel through there. But it also has a hospital that has a trauma center. There's schools there that need services. There's we recognize that there was some economic potential there that entrepreneurs could serve. And so I think that was one of the reasons we chose Tuba City.
Another one was because it was self-governing.
That's right.
And so we were thinking about, okay, can we prototype an entrepreneurship ecosystem in a community that can govern itself? Meaning, could we work with Tuba City to get to a point where it does issue its own business site leases to entrepreneurs, or where we can demonstrate an increase in sales tax revenue in a community, or even get to a point where maybe they have their own registration or licensing process for businesses. And that's still, I think, our goal in many ways is we need to demonstrate the impact of the business community and why our elected leaders, specifically our Native elected leaders, why they should be fostering this kind of work and why they should be driving it at a very fundamental level.
And I think that there's the opportunity for entrepreneurs to actually fill that space is there. I mean, there's challenges around the land issues that I think we didn't anticipate would impact us so much.
Yeah.
So that's a whole saga.
When we started this, we didn't come at it with nothing. We had resources right at the get-go. We had an incredible fiscal sponsor. We had an incredible donor who gave us an initial $1.2 million investment. All of the co-founders had nonprofit management experience. We were already embedded within the community that we wanted to serve, and yet the thing that really held us back was the land issue. And that I often think about that, like, we are educated, driven, passionate women with resources and connections, and we still could not get any land or building in a community that, is a pseudo home for a lot of us. So I think that's important, because if we can't do it, then how can you expect somebody with an idea to really get over all of these immense hurdles? It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's also crazy that I feel like we had a lot of experience up to that point, but we still didn't anticipate that would be such a huge barrier.
I remember us saying, like, Tuba City would be easy. I think we said the word easy, which...
It would be the easiest to do this
maybe
in.
easiest, fine, but still that. It was naive. It was very naive.
Yeah. Yeah, because I had worked in Tuba City on, development. And so I was very familiar with the land issue, with the fact that BIA owns a majority of the land base there, and that there's not a lot available in terms of business sites. And so we had this partnership that we were building for a piece of land that was available in Tuba City. We were partnering with the owners of the lease, And so that was why we're like, okay, we have this. We have the lease. We have the money. We have experience. We can get this done. And this is going to be so cool. But then it was not from there.
That was our plan A.
Yeah.
And I don't think originally we even had backup plans.
No.
But we ended up going through 6 plans before we got to the 7th, which is where we're today. So we started with that, trying to partner with somebody who had an existing land lease. They had 8 acres of land in Tuba City. I think it was the last kind of 8 acres of land available.
Still the only 8 acres available in Tuba City for business site leases.
Yeah. And I feel like that's really hard for people to comprehend, because when you come into Tuba City, you see land everywhere. Mm-hmm. But the thing that is really difficult to understand is that none of that is accessible for development, for businesses, even for homes, which there's a huge housing crisis in Tuba City, and yet they can't really build new homes.
Even for services, I mean, the medical services there struggle to find the land and the infrastructure they need to provide medical services. Even the nonprofits, I remember there was one business site lease, like a small space that we were looking at, but the Veterans Administration was also looking at that same space. So it was sort of like, and we were both told no.
Why is it that there's land everywhere in Tuba City, but you can't access it? Is it a trust land thing? I really don't get it myself.
I think what makes it complicated is that every piece of land within the reservation has assigned stewards of that land. And it could be the federal government, it could be the tribe, it could be an individual business site lease holder, it could be a grazing permit holder, it could be a church, it could be, so there's all these pockets of land, and you don't know who is actually managing that land. There's not things like zoning permits, or there's not even a database where you can go and say, okay, I know what that land is. I know what the restrictions are. I know who controls it. I know what's happening. And it's just sort of like, even when there is a clear owner or manager of that land, there's usually other stipulations like, well, it's, there's some sort of legal dispute right now, or, that you can't use that because this is the plan for it, and, it's being held for that. So it's just several layers of government and nonprofit and other institutions that have had an influence over tribal land over the years. And so now it's sort of just this hodgepodge of restrictions, and none of it is, and the funny thing is that this is, I think, one of our biggest challenges, and the reason why co-working space is so important is that none of it is for the development of the economy for the local community. Like, that's not even a priority in all of this mess. Nobody said, you know what? Business owners, entrepreneurs, the local people need access to that land. Let's fix those problems. Mm-hmm. That just hasn't come up yet. And I think that's one of the, despite everybody agreeing that it's one of the major challenges for business development.
So after we went through, we worked on that 8 acres with that partner for about a year or so. And it wasn't our business site lease. So we were kind of just hanging out, waiting for things to get started. But things just weren't getting started. So that's when we started talking about, well, maybe we need to have a plan B or a plan C. So the next thing we did was what I think the tribe asks you to do, which is go to the Regional Business Development Office. We call them the RBDOs. And the RBDOs are a component of our centralized government in Window-Rock. And one of their primary roles is to oversee the business site leasing process for the agencies around the Navajo Nation. So we went to our local office, which is in Tuba City, and we inquired about what business site leases were available. Because again, you drive around town and you see buildings that clearly look available, or like little plots of land that look like they could be developed, but there's a story behind every single one of those. We got all kinds of stories like, oh, that land is being reserved for blah, or, oh, we can't talk about that building. Next, or, oh, the owner actually hasn't relinquished that lease yet, even though that building has been sitting dilapidated for more than 10 years. There was a reason or an excuse, I like to think, for almost why Change Labs and they told me there was a waiting list for some of these plots of land and some of these buildings for why we wouldn't be able to access it. And I remember just feeling really frustrated.
Well, remember we were also told no because we were a nonprofit organization.
That's right.
Because we were a 501c3 and they said you can't access any of this land anyway because you're not a business.
Which isn't true. And just the fact that an office would tell you that, which is A, misinformation, and B, just, I mean, that doesn't even make sense. The nonprofits provide critical services to communities. Why would you ban them from accessing land in the community? So anyhow, I remember being very deflated by that whole process. And we went back and forth with our local RBDO for about a month or two. And they did try and offer up some alternatives. So the next alternative that we explored, they were the ones that said, oh, there is that abandoned strip mall in town. Here is the phone number for the owner. Give them a ring. So we pursued that for an entire year. And we paid legal fees to have a lease agreement redlined with that company. So for context, there is this strip mall right in the center of town, right on Main Street. It currently houses 2 fast food chains, and then there's just like a whole huge row of fantastic real estate. But it's been sitting empty for a long time other than the 2 fast food chains. So we got pretty far along in that process. We were going to lease, I think, like 2 retail pads in there and make about 2,000 square feet of space. And then it kind of all crumbled because of legal jurisdiction and infighting between the government and the business owner and the co-owners of that strip mall. And that was probably 2019, 2020 timeframe. And to my knowledge, it's still being disputed because there's still nobody in that strip mall. That was very frustrating.
Yeah, we got so close and we were really excited because the potential for that was that entire strip mall could be entrepreneurs because we were thinking, we could have our incubator here. People could start with a small space and then there'd be all this space for them to move out into. And we had dreamed about that. Remember we said, oh, look at that. That would be
let's buy the building.
Yeah, let's buy that building. And I think we even looked into offering to buy the building and sort of let everybody out of their legal whatever legal ramifications for that agreement, because it was just an agreement that went bad. And so, but then we just kind of
they basically just stopped communicating.
Ghosted us, yeah.
Yeah. And there's only so much you can do. I remember we went down to their offices in Phoenix, tried to get them in person, but yeah, that just kind of got swept away in all kinds of legal holes that we couldn't dig our way out of. There's also a Navajo Nation shopping centers in Tuba City, so we went there as well, looking for a retail pad, but everything was taken. So this was the point where we kind of realized that at that point, Plan A still hadn't come into fruition, and we had started pursuing Plan B, Plan C, and as things started falling away, we were thinking, oh God, what are we going to do? So the RBDO also advised that we go to the private landowners in Tuba City, so I started just going and physically knocking on doors of landowners, which was very unpleasant. I definitely got a lot of doors slammed in my face. I just went on people's properties, which was probably not a good thing. But nobody was interested in leasing us their private land in Tuba. Then we also started talking to the Hopi tribe because they had previously let us squat on a little piece of their land in 2019 for about a year or so. So we talked to them about, is it possible to get some land on your side of town? The Paiute tribe also owns a few acres of land in Tuba City. So we were given some contact information to reach out to them to see if we could develop something on one of their acres in Tuba. And the whole time, too, we were kind of looking at these buildings on Main Street in Tuba City. These beautiful old brick buildings that I think were built in the 70s. Is that right? No,
it's like 1910.
Oh, okay. I'm way off. Those buildings are managed by the federal government, by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And we thought maybe there's a way to access those buildings. I can't, that was a process.
I wouldn't even say managed. I would say abandoned. Sorry.
Yeah.
By the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The land there, it's land. So the short story is Tuba City used to have an army base. The army base was abandoned and moved to Fort Defiance. And when they did that, they gave that land, that piece of land, to the Bureau of Indian Affairs as what they call an administrative area. And it was so BIA could have offices on the western side of Navajo. And that's the status of it, of that piece of land now. So what that means is that you have to go through the Bureau of Indian Affairs to access that land and those buildings and get leases from the federal government in order to occupy the buildings. But the problem is that they're historic buildings. They have, they need a lot of remediation, and nobody will pick up that bill. And so there's these huge, beautiful buildings in the center of town in Tuba City that everybody passes by every single day, multiple times, and they're abandoned. They can't be used because of that situation. And so we started a campaign.
Mm-hmm. Did a petition.
We sent out postcards.
We got like 5,000 signatures from local residents, which in a community of 8,000, that's quite a bit.
We did. Did we do a White House petition, or was it what petition? It was an online petition.
It was an online petition because our local congressman, his aide, advised that the only way that we could begin this process, we had to start with remediation, and there needed to be a congressional line item budget for that to happen, and that the only way to get a line item on the budget would be to petition. So we tried that. We had this whole campaign. We collected online signatures. We got a fair bit, but not enough to make any sort of wave. In fairness, though, this was about the time where COVID-19 was starting to, make its way, create some fear. People knew something was coming but didn't know what. I just feel like our petition wasn't the priority at that point in time.
Yeah, and also elections happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to move at the pace of, politics for things like that. And so, and we were also like almost getting desperate to the point where like, this has to work. Like, this would be great if it could work, but we were sort of like, this is our last opportunity, because the other option was, we looked at Cameron too, remember? I toured that tin building in Cameron that was available. Somebody said, well, there's this old, wood manufacturing that you guys might, it needs some work. And I remember going there and I'm like, this needs way more work than we it's a great size, but it was just, there was no way we were going to be able to get in there in the time frame that we wanted.
Yeah. I remember we looked at those abandoned motels too in Gray Mountain, right? I mean, we were desperate. Desperate's the right word. And we were just feeling like, oh God, it's not going to work.
Yeah. We started to think about just opening up in Flagstaff.
Yes, but that is counter to what we're trying to do at Change Labs. It's really all about, we need this infrastructure and these resources in our community. But we had offers from Flagstaff. We had offers from the government in Page to use some of their facilities. So we got support from everywhere except our own community until I think it was February 2020 when Nelson Cody gave me a call. So Nelson works at the Tuba City chapter. He is the community planner. And we had crossed paths just because mean, we had been roaming around town then for several years, inquiring, knocking on doors, asking questions. So they had heard that we were looking for a building, that we were trying to access a business site lease. So Nelson somehow got my email or gave me a call. I didn't really know him, but he called me up and said, like, can the chapter help in some way? And I said, I don't know. How can the chapter help? We need land, or we're looking for a building. We've tried this, and this, and this, and this. And I remember we just had an intro call initially, and then a few weeks or days later, he emailed me and said, I think the chapter could give you guys some chapter track land to use. And I didn't really know what that meant. It's funny. I mean, I think this is the issue too, is a lot of us grow up in our communities and we still don't know how a lot of things work. So I remember saying to Jessica, like, what does that mean? And what would that look like? Would we own the land? Could we own our building? There's so many questions. But they were the first to sort of offer us a solution and step in and say, hey, we can help. We have 30 acres of chapter track land. I'm building a plan for it, but we'd like to see some entrepreneurship support. And the land they initially offered us was like, initially they did offer us some scraps. They said, like, there's a triangle of space right here. And I remember we were so desperate at that point. I was like, I will take it. Give us that triangle. But then when we started working with our architects and started getting into the details with the chapter, and they started to appreciate what it is that we were trying to do, they offered us a full acre right next to them too, which is fantastic. And that's when we started drafting up land use agreements. Lawyers got involved. We started thinking through how does ownership work, or what is ownership in this context of chapter tract land. And what we were doing with them had never been done before. So we were in many ways a guinea pig for them. Tuba City, despite its self-governing status, they currently don't issue business site leases. I think we are the first non-government entity that they've allowed to use land. So even as we were drafting these agreements and these contracts, we were getting pushback from Navajo Nation DOJ, from our just warnings, is this legal? Can this be done? Does Tuba City have the right? Does Change Labs have the right? And we just decided to charge ahead, because at that point we had tried everything and this was the only way to go.
Yeah, it was sort of like people were saying, this could happen, you could build your building and then they just take it back from you. So we were having tons of discussions with attorneys and lawyers who all had like a little bit of information about the situation that they could offer. And then, some of them said, oh, that's not going to happen. Yes, it could happen, but it's probably not going to happen. And I remember thinking, okay, let's just, we're just going to move forward. We're going to, we talked about this is our last opportunity, our only chance. Let's just do this and see what happens. And I think people have done that before on the res and it didn't work out well. And I knew that, but I was also thinking like, well, we'll just have to work through what's coming.
Yeah. And
I also halfway thought like, well, the chapter's probably not going to move forward anyway when they hear this pushback. So it was really awesome when they said, yeah, we heard from DOJ and we're just going to continue. We're going to sign the agreement.
Yeah. A chapter resolution passed in May 2021. And I mean, it took a long time to process that we had this acre of land. But then I feel like we tried to go super fast because we were like, oh God, what if people change their minds? Or what if DOJ comes in and says like invalid? So we just started racing at the speed of light as fast as we could to get things going. But then of course the pandemic was happening still to some degree, and that slowed things down.
And remember there were storage units on the space?
Yes.
I thought those storage units were going to stay too.
So much stuff.
I thought if we get those storage units to be moved, then it wasn't real until those storage units were gone.
Yeah. They were gone by August and we were shocked.
Yeah.
We thought, we were convinced that they were never going to go away and that it was really not real. But they were gone by August.
Yeah.
And then there was this whole ordeal too with finding a construction firm that was willing to work out on Tuba City, especially in 2021 when construction was going crazy. Materials were all over the place. Part of the challenge was that, as a nonprofit, we had raised a bunch of philanthropic dollars to finance the building. And a lot of those donors expected that money to be spent down in a specific period of time. So in some ways, there was a little bit of a blessing of the pandemic because everybody was really flexible and everybody understood that, there was all these outside forces intervening that were delaying our progress. So we had a lot of donors who were really flexible and allowed us to stretch that out. But we knew that there was the clock was ticking on a lot of that funding and that we needed to get things going. And that's when Rock Gap Engineering came into the picture. They're a Navajo-owned firm owned by Keith Keitso. I think that was key, is that Keith grew up in the Tuba City community. So I think without that, we couldn't find anybody to work with us. It was considered too small of a project in a too remote of an area, especially in the middle of a pandemic where at that time, the Navajo Nation was still more or less shut down, even though we were into 2021. So that Keith's company, in many ways, was kind of the only one that was willing to work with us.
Yeah. I mean, it's a challenge to do construction projects on the res anyway, but during a pandemic, when the supply chain is all over, that was even more of a challenge. And I think, even if there was a construction company, and we had actually construction companies in the Flagstaff area saying, oh yeah, we'd be willing to help. But when the pandemic came, it was like, we just, we're barely making it on our own. It's just too big there's just so many unknowns. And we're not, I think one of them said, you really need to find somebody who knows how to work on the res because right now it's just too risky for anybody to go somewhere where they don't know what's the way things work. They don't know how to get things done. And so, yeah, we had to depend on Rock Gap.
Yeah. And then it was about 1.5 years for a 1,400 square foot building. There was all kinds of hiccups that came in through there. And a lot of it boiled back to this agreement that we had signed with the chapter. It did end up rearing its ugly head again because when we applied for certain permits or this account needed to be set up and then all of these entities wanted to review the paperwork and what had been signed and agreed upon, we definitely got some pushback like, this isn't legal. You guys can't have electricity. Fortunately, the chapter, again, stepped in to save us. And they basically stepped in to say, okay, well, the chapter is applying for this, not Change Labs. Or the chapter is requesting the right-of-way or whatever it needed to be done. And man, the chapter played a huge role in this building. And I feel like that should be the roles of chapters, though, or there should be somebody who's doing that. So I'm just grateful that people like Nelson and Duran were there to shepherd this. But I'm hopeful that there's more chapter leaders out there that want to facilitate projects like this. And I think they could talk to Nelson and Duran to understand what that really took to do it.
Yeah, and from sort of the leadership understanding what the vision was and understanding what the value of supporting entrepreneurs in their community was and sort of being available, like if there's a way they can help, to step in to help when they needed to, and passing those resolutions and not, and sort of putting themselves in a position where they're first, this is the first time this type of agreement has been put in place. And it's the first time there's a partnership between a nonprofit and a chapter where the chapter itself is really, they have their own their own skin in the game. It's not just Change Labs. It's not just us. They had to sort of take some chances and some risks on their own as well to say, yes, you can put in the electrical lines and we're, using our application and our status of being on chapter track land. So we're finally opening our co-working space in Tonina's on June 16th, 2023. It's so exciting because I really liked what you said earlier about the fact that when you have people who are like-minded, who are driven, who want to make change, when you put them together, when they have a space where they can come together, there's just no telling what can happen there. And so I'm really excited to see that. I also just love that people are gonna get what they need. Sometimes, and this has happened, this has been both of our experiences, and I know it's the experience of many entrepreneurs across the res, is you're in a space, all you need to do is send an email, or all you need to do is, call somebody or have a call or take a video call, and you just need to go somewhere where they'll help you, you're welcomed, the equipment is there, it works, there's internet. I think that's going to be such a huge resource. And also, no telling what can happen with that as well.
Yeah, that's already started happening. So one of our alumni, Chiji Farms, they just last weekend set up garden beds at our space, which I was really excited about. And they planted white corn. That wasn't even in our plan, but it just kind of organically happened, and I'm excited to see more of that sort of thing happening.
The other huge impact that this is going to make is that people in the community, when they see our building, we already get really compliments about the building because it's so different from anything else that's around there. People want to know what's that, what's going on there, why is that building so pretty? And so I'm really proud about that because we really controlled the design. We put a lot of work into just the aesthetics, which I feel like a lot of times in our community, we're just given, we're just given what we're given. We're given modular buildings, and we're given, spaces that are just not designed well and don't take our cultural values and our cultural skills into consideration. And so I'm really proud that we were able to do that. And even with the garden beds, it's just sort of a nod to what our economy used to be in the past, and that we can go back to that and depend on that and have that visible and have a space for that in our work going forward.
Yeah. So now we're looking at how we replicate this process, or if we want to, because it was kind of a nightmare, to be honest. But we know that staying in Tuba City, that to have the impact that we want to have, we can't just stay in Tuba City forever. And we've been eyeing Shiprock for a long time for a variety of reasons.
For expansion, not
for expansion. Yes, yes. So we've been looking at, do we want to repeat this process in Shiprock? Is there an easier way now that we've been through it once? Can we anticipate other things that we might try in a different community? But we've also just been wondering in general, this process that we just made it through, and the perseverance that it took, and the resources that it took, and the connections and the conversations and the investment of time and money, is that really replicable for other nonprofits, for business owners? Don't know yet. I think in theory, the way that we talked about it with the chapter is that we start with this land use agreement, and that becomes a business site lease, and that maybe Change Labs can work with the chapter to build their capacity to issue their business site leases. And if that were to happen, then I think this could become replicable. But it's unclear whether or not that's going to happen just yet. So it does, we went through all of this, but I'm always wondering, like, who will it help in the long run, other than the communities that we directly serve, but is this replicable for other nonprofits, or even for us as we think about expanding across Navajo? That's really tough.
Or even for entrepreneurs, because this is definitely what our entrepreneurs face when they're even trying to open up a business is, this 2 or 3 years of asking and being told no and going somewhere else and asking again. And then somebody who has some power to say, I believe in what you're doing. This is what we're going to do. This is how we can help. And those relationships. And so I feel like in order for this to be replicable, more people who have the ability to say yes need to have that vision and be willing to sort of, it's not even really a risk. I mean, they're just willing to do that work and challenge what's already there and say, we can figure this out. And then as far as nonprofits or entrepreneurs, you know, really having to work with the community, and it's something that's not normal across, you know, other outside or communities outside of the reservation, but we have to do that in our communities. So I think that that's also something that's important to think about.
What we were naive about, or I'm speaking for myself here, is I didn't really understand a lot of the ways that policies on the Navajo Nation and even at the federal level are designed that really stymied a lot of this progress. And it goes beyond just accessing land for a building. It impacts sales tax on the reservation. It impacts how we register businesses. It impacts how we incentivize small business creation and growth. So when I think about the future for Change Labs, I'm thinking about this experience that we just went through, the experience that all of our entrepreneurs go through. And that, yes, we need to continue creating physical infrastructure with basic amenities for our entrepreneurs. And yes, we need to continue providing mentorship, coaching, training opportunities. We need to create physical space for communities to build. But there's also a core policy issue here that needs to be addressed. And the challenge with that is it's so tangled and complex and old and ancient, and the people that protect or surround those policies aren't necessarily incentivized to change it. But our experience with the chapter gives me hope that there are people out there who do want to see that change, and they're willing to force it into being.
And I think despite all of the challenges that we went through with Tuba City, we have learned so much. We have so much data. We've been really intentional about designing programs based on our experience and also the data that we've been able to gather. And I think that that's really valuable in going into other communities and expanding Change Labs into communities across the reservation, because we know how to design our programs. We know when something's not working and we pull back and we try something else. We're very good at being flexible because we have to, we use the resources that we have. And so we know how to do this. We know how to build entrepreneurship support centers on the reservation, which I think is the most valuable thing. We just need those community partners. We need partners off the reservation to want to be a part of this sort of evolution or revolution. So I'm just really excited that despite all of the challenges, we really have created something that's so valuable. And also our co-working space is really going to solidify entrepreneurship in this community, and just make that space. And I don't see any way that it can go away, despite any policies, any, influence from, industries or even politics. I'm really confident that this has really solidified the future of entrepreneurship in our communities, and I'm really happy about that.
A friend of mine said our work is economic justice work. I like that term. Mm-hmm. And ChatGPT says we're cultural revitalization. So I like those too. If you'd like to learn more about Change Labs, you can visit us on the web at www.nativestartup.org, or you can come visit us now in Tuba City. We'll be open Monday through Friday, and we're located at 230 South Main Street.
We have an address.